Hello guys, and welcome back to the Quick Start AngularJS course. It's time to code our second view, the book list view. Let's start with the HTML first. So you can see I have already coded the HTML and CSS for it. Let's go through it quickly. I have added a book list wrapper div which will contain a list of all the books in our store. The form control with text input to search through the list of books, and the list of all the books which will go here in this UL element. Some CSS updates which controls the width, padding, and spacing of all the new elements. Let's run the application. Okay, so we have our book list view painted on the screen, and we have one static book to show. Now looking at this HTML gives us the feel of static data. You can see the book name, price, rating are hard-coded in the page. And what if we have thousands of books in our store? Repeating this static HTML is not at all feasible approach. So let's make this static HTML dynamic. Let's create the controller first. I hope by now you know how to create a controller, right? By using the ng-controller directive. Let's add the controller to the book list wrapper div. Okay, so using this controller object, we can control all the views inside this wrapper div. Let's refresh the browser and check console window for the issues. Okay, so you can see we got one error here. Book list controller, not a function, got undefined. Can you guess what it is? Right, we haven't created our controller constructor function yet. So let's open our app.js file and create the controller constructor function. Now, when Angular creates the controller, it also creates one more object as a dependency. What is it? Yes, it's $scope. So let's pass $scope as a dependency to this function. One note I would like to add here. You can see most of the Angular specific object names starts with a $sign. So whenever you see a variable starting with a $sign, you can think of it as self-contained AngularJS object. Okay, so we got the $scope object. Let's create our data. Let's refer our initial analysis. Right, here we have two different models, one to keep data for all the books and one for the books added to the cart. The cart model is a bit tricky, so we will have discussion on it later, as this model has to be shared with the next view, the cart list view. But let's focus on the books model only. Open the app.js file and start creating the model. So we have number of books to be stored. We will use array to store our books. Let's create an array $scope.books. Now let's populate it with some hard-coded book objects. So we have populated this array with some hard-coded book objects with image URL, some URL name with some name, and other properties like price, rating, binding, publisher, release date, and details. Our model can have many books, maybe thousands of books. But to keep it simple, let's have this many books only. You can see one thing, I'm hard coding all of these model values, which is not a good idea. Later, these model values can be populated from database. Okay, it's time to plug in our view with the data. We have different type of data if we compare it with previous view. Right, here we have to display collection of data, and Angular team has already thought of the scenario and they have created a nice directive for it, ng-repeat. ng-repeat is one of the frequently used directive of AngularJS. It helps us displaying the collection of data. So we don't need to write the same HTML template for each of the data in the collection. Write once and the job is done. And the good news is we already have the template. Where it is? It's in our HTML file. as all the books are nothing but repeating this li element with different data. So let's use this li element as our template and give it some additional syntax to repeat it with different data. Let's decorate this li element with ngRepeat directive. The first part is a directive name, and the second part is an expression which is going to get evaluated in the current scope. So we are saying to the AngularJS compile service, please repeat this li element for each book in the books array. And every time you repeat this li element, please use the current book object. We know this books object is available in the current scope created by our controller, book list controller. Next step, we need to plug this li element with book object from the books collection. So how can we tell this to ngRepeat? We can do that using the data binding expressions. Let's replace all of these hard-coded static values with our book object properties. Okay, let's run it in the browser. Wow! All our books are getting rendered now using one template, thanks to ngRepeat. But we got a problem here. We are getting the same image for all the books. Let's handle this. Okay, so we need to replace this hard-coded URL with the image URL property of our book object. And we can achieve it through an expression, book.imageURL in single quotes. But as I have copied the images for books in the folder here called images, so we need to refer to the images inside this folder. We can do that by specifying the relative URL to those images. So we can say, please use images from this folder images and the image name. Let's refresh and see in the browser. Good, we got specific image for specific book. Okay, so now let's go through the compilation process of this template. We know when Angular sees the ng-controller directive, it creates the controller object along with the $scope object as a dependency. The real magic starts with the ngRepeat directive. When Angular compiles the ngRepeat directive, it creates the new child scope object for each repeated template. So for each li element, it will create new child scope and store the individual book object from the collection into li element $scope object. And the final output, our view, will be rendered using this new child scope object's data. You can see each li element is having different image URL. This is the magic done by our child scope created by ngRepeat directive. Before concluding this lecture, let's add the functionality for our add to cart button. We'll write ng-click directive to handle the click event on each book and pass the clicked book as an argument. Okay, next let's open the app.js file and write the business logic for click of add to cart button. We'll write a function add to cart in the $scope object and just do the console.log for the clicked book. Let's test this in the browser. Refresh, open the console and click on add to cart button. Nice, we are getting the book object which we have selected for adding to the cart. Okay guys, that's all for this video. We have covered a magical directive ngRepeat to render the list of data. You can use a similar approach for tabular data as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.